Yep.
and getting the health benefits of exercise to create a caloric deficit, to create fat loss. It doesn't matter whether or not they burn those calories using a form of exercise that relies predominantly on carbohydrate, fat, or protein, correct?
It's not that it doesn't matter. It's that either one will work. Because when we say things like that, it doesn't mean they're actually identical. There are some slight differences, and maybe those differences are important for some people and not others. I'd say is either one is a viable strategy.
Great. What about protein as a fuel?
As an actual fuel, so here, let me give you an analogy. Imagine that you were with me a few weeks ago in southern Montana, and we were out in the wilderness for a week, okay? And it's cold out there, and you needed to make a fire. And if I said, look, you can pick any of these things. There's some wood over there. We brought some newspaper, and then we brought a match, and we need to create a fire. And we're going to use that fire to energy and heat up. Okay, I said, great. The very first place you would probably start to make that fire is the match. You light the match, and any match, hey, it's going to light immediately, but it's probably going to last 5 to 20 seconds, I don't know, before it burns out. That's phosphocreatine. Real fast, real burns out. If you were smart, you would take that match and then light the newspaper on fire, right? Now, if you were to burn a whole newspaper, it is more energy than you get to the match, but you still, I don't know, what's it going to take? A few minutes, some number of minutes before an entire newspaper burns up? Yeah, 5, I don't know, right? Depends on which type of newspaper it is, I guess, right? Amazing. That's carbohydrate, right? If you were really smart, you would use that to then light a piece of wood on fire. And a wood, if you've been in the wilderness, it could last hours, days. It's really quite unlimited. Your phosphocreatine storage is very limited, small. Glycogen is a lot higher because you can store it in muscle, you can store it in other places. So you have more, but not a lot. Fat is unlimited. The average person, if you're around, say, 70 kilos, up 170 pounds or so, and you're moderately lean, maybe 15% body fat, nothing crazy, you probably have enough stored fat to create enough energy to survive for more than 30 days, right? This would literally be, if you ingested 0 calories, you have enough fuel in your stored fat to keep you alive for certainly 30 days. You wouldn't feel good and all those things. But energetically, basically, fat will never, ever be your limiting factor to performance. So when we start talking about, well, what limits my performance in these areas, you can just wipe fat off the list. It will never be your limiting factor to any type of endurance performance. You simply have way too much. The only problem with fat is it's just too slow. I've got to mobilize it. I've got to get it in the blood, move it, that whole thing. Too slow. So if I want to go faster, I will never be able to fully utilize fat, which is why we talked about earlier. You'll never see a situation in which somebody is 100% burning fat as a fuel and no percent carbohydrate. It's always going to be too slow. Highest you'll get maybe 70% so. Protein in this equation is none of that. Now you may notice, how do you make paper?
It's fibrous. You combine it with water. It gets pressed. It compressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's made from wood. How do you make a match? It's made from wood. What's carbohydrate? A chain of carbon. What's fat? A chain of carbon. These are similar molecules, right? They're meant to give you pros and cons. It's very difficult to just light a log on fire without a lot of work. You'd have to burn. So these are complementary systems that are really close to the same thing. Protein is none of those things. Protein is more like a piece of metal. So if you were out in the woods with me and we were trying to make a fire and you're like, hey, look, I found some old railroad over there. Let's throw that on there. I would probably look at you like you're crazy. Now, technically, can you melt metal? Sure, but you're going to burn a lot of energy to try to get a little bit back out of the metal. And now you've also cost yourself a very, very valuable structure. So protein as a fuel source for exercise or metabolism is just an incredibly poor choice. Your body will do it. Again, maybe 5 to 10%. But you're burning a very valuable supply in a situation in which you don't know where there's ever going to be any more. Remember, protein is fairly transient. You're not very good at storing it. You can store a ton of carbohydrate and an unlimited, literally, amount of fat. So you just really need to disregard thinking about protein as a fuel source. Your body does not want to do it. You're not good at it. You can go through a process of gluconeogenesis from protein. make glucose from it is just very poor. You're not going to get much out of the exchange, and you've burned your supply of metal, which is going to be very difficult. It's a very high commodity in the woods or the wilderness to have something like metal.
For people that consume very low carbohydrate or zero carbohydrate diets, are they pulling more energy from muscle? So, which I imagine is a conversion of amino acids into ready carbon chains.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular case, once you've reached a certain level of adaptation, you've just gotten extremely good at generating glucose from other fashions, right? So you can bias heavily towards fat adaptation. The downside is, and we've seen this borne in the literature, you're going to perform slower. So if you don't care about maximizing performance, especially over something where it is a maximal effort for a few minutes or something, then maybe you're not concerned. And that's absolutely great, especially for people who just don't exercise. Then, hey, geez, very little concern here. But if you're interested in your performance and you're wondering why you're just like slugging it down, well, what you've done is you've down-regulated the ability, literally the enzymes responsible for that entire anaerobic glycolysis portion, they get down-regulated, which means there's not as much around anymore. And so you get really bad and slow at using carbohydrates as a fuel source. So it's a very poor strategy for people in an anaerobic-based sport or who like that type of activity. Again, if you don't care, no problem. If you don't exercise at all, then you really have no problem there, which is actually why a high-fat, low-carbohydrate nutrition strategy for people who don't do much physical activity is probably it's very effective. It is a really good strategy for weight management, for energy stabilization throughout the day, and the research would very much support that.
In my observation, I would agree. I've tried low carbohydrate diets of severely limiting or completely eliminating carbohydrate, and after about 2 or 3 days, I feel pretty lousy, but mostly because I want to train very intensely in the gym. In addition to doing longer runs, I tend to do all of those things across the week.
Yeah.
But I've also observed, and in fact know several people that love the very low carbohydrate, aka ketogenic type diet. They're not doing ketogenic diets for mental health reasons per se, but indeed those people tend to do very limited exercise, or they tend to do a lot of long endurance, but low intensity long endurance. These are the I walk to get my exercise types, and they do indeed walk a lot. And some of them manage to control their weight very readily and like that diet for that reason. When we had Lane Norton on the podcast, he pointed out quite aptly that in order to lose weight, you have to restrict something, either time or macronutrients, et cetera, to arrive at that subcaloric threshold, get below the sub-maintenance threshold.
I guess one of the things I want to point out is this should be received as, again, not a this is better or worse. This is just, you now have a ton of options. So whatever personal preference, other factors, you get to craft this strategy of performance, aesthetics, and health based on your personal preferences.
At this point, I'd like to go back to our classic list of 9 adaptations that exercise can induce. The first 4, of course, being largely unrelated to today's conversation, but that were covered in the episode that we did on strength, speed, and hypertrophy. So just to remind people, the 9 adaptations are: number 1, skill and technique; 2, speed; 3, power, which is speed times force; 4, strength; and 5, hypertrophy. Today, we're talking about the remaining adaptations on that list, starting with muscular endurance, followed by anaerobic capacity, followed by maximal aerobic output, and finishing at number 9 with long duration exercise. So if we could start with muscular endurance, this would be number 6 on the list of 9 adaptations. Muscular endurance. How do I build muscular endurance? Why should I build muscular endurance? And just to remind me, what fuel sources are predominating when I'm training for muscular endurance?
Great. So remember, muscular endurance is something that's going to be generally in a local muscle. It is not a cardiovascular or systemic issue. And it tends to be something in the neighborhood of, say, 5 to maybe even up to 50 repetitions. So this is the classic example we'll give here is how many push-ups can you do in a row? Most people are going to land somewhere in that range I just said. How many sit-ups can you do in a minute? How many pull-ups? How long can you hang on a bar? as a dead hang, things like that. That's muscular endurance. Muscular endurance is not a mile run or a marathon or anything like that. So how long can I stand without breaking posture? This is muscular endurance.
A plank, a wall sit.
Great. Yes. Love all these things. Okay. Now, the reason I took you on that big, long metabolism journey is so I could help you understand exactly how to train this factor or any of these factors with a more comprehensive understanding of what's happening. Meaning, thinking back to the metabolism, if I'm going to ask my triceps to do 50 push-ups in a row, what's going to be my limiting factor? Am I going to run out of fat? No chance. Am I going to run out of glycogen? No chance. That's way too few of repetitions. You have a lot left there. So what's going to be the thing that stops me from getting 51 repetitions? Either you're going to have too high of a pH rise, so too much acid buildup, or you're going to have a problem clearing the waste. So really, this is two factors: dealing with acid buildup and getting acid out of the muscle tissue and into circulation, because you have plenty of ability to handle that small amount of acid buildup in your entire body. It's just you can't handle it in that tiny spot. Now, I picked the tricep for a very specific reason. You're going to deal with more pain when you use a large muscle group like your quads or your glutes than you are with a small muscle group. For example, nobody ever threw up after arm day, but a lot of people throw up after leg day. Why is that? Look at the total amount of waste that you're dumping into your system when you have quadrupled or 10x the muscle size. Small muscle groups are only really going to be challenged in that local area. Large ones will dump so much waste into the system that you'll want to avoid that as quickly as possible. And that's one of the reasons why you throw up after hard exercise. Great. So the reason
I'm laughing because I don't think I've ever thrown up from a weight training session. And so it's making me wonder if I've ever trained that hard. I've received or obtained the progress that I've wanted to generally over time, not every week, every workout, every month, but certainly over the 30 plus years that I've been weight training, I've achieved the results I've wanted. I have, however, vomited after a long run when I didn't hydrate well.
Sure.
Or if I drank too much water.
Sure. Oh, sure. Too much water. Yeah, you'll get that out quick.
Right. I just want to be clear because I think some people are getting the picture that if they're not vomiting at their end after their leg workout, that they're not training according to your standards. Again, by the way, Dr. Andy Galpin runs experiments in his lab. He's recruiting subjects all the
time. Also known as my graduate students.
That's right. Yeah. In any event, sorry to interrupt, but I felt it was a necessary interruption. So muscular endurance, there's plenty of fuel.
Plenty of fuel. You manage acid buildup, and you also need to get that fuel out of you. That's going to be a capillarization issue. So the way that we can think about this is capillaries surround your muscle, and the whole point of them is so that blood can come into them. They hit this capillarization. That actually slows the diffusion rate of blood down, and so you can exchange nutrients in and get waste products out, and then we get things back into circulation. So the more of those you have, the better you are at dispersing any of these waste products buildup, whether it's CO2 or the acid. So the adaptation you're looking for here is an increase in capillarization, potentially a slight increase in mitochondria, but the time is too fast, right? So we're going to be able to need to do these 50 repetitions in, say, under a minute or something like that. So getting the mobilization into the mitochondria, getting fuel that way, too slow. It's not really going to get our performance here. So what are strategies to increase acid buffering ability and then capillarization? So on the capillarization side, you simply need to train at that ability. So you go close to failure and practice that often. That alone will increase blood flow to that local area, which will take you through your process of increasing capillarization. Easy peasy, specificity. Right,
so
there.
Just to briefly interrupt, I find it remarkable, although not surprising given how amazing the human body is, that simply by doing some movement repeatedly, like a wall sit or or push-ups or dips for that matter, repeatedly over and over and over until you reach that failure point, or that quaking point in the case of a wall sit, that provides a stimulus for more capillaries to be built into the system. Literally, the production or the the trafficking of endothelial cells, which make up the capillaries and
Exactly.
allow basically more little pipes to feed the system with oxygen and remove waste products.
It's
correct?
like irrigation, right? Imagine you had a giant field and you had two big pipes running down the outside. Well, in fact, if you want to make sure water gets evenly dispersed across the entire field, you'll have a bunch of offshooting little pipes. And the more of those you have, the more coverage you get.
Do we know what the specific signal is that says, hey, I failed at this. We need more capillaries.
I actually don't know what that is. I would speculate it's a combination of acidity as well as carbon dioxide and probably some nitric oxide stuff happening there, but I actually don't know.
I'm guessing nobody knows for sure because we still don't know, for instance, what the exact signal is for hypertrophy. It's kind of an amazing situation. We know the requirements for getting the result we want,
Yeah.
but we still don't know what the specific signal is.
Yeah.
In any event, what I'm hearing is building more capillaries is great for enhancing muscular endurance. And the way to get more capillaries into those muscles is to train for muscular endurance by getting close to failure or to some point where you simply can't continue for whatever reason. Could you give us an example of what a reasonable training protocol might be in terms of the classic Galpin list now of exercise choice, maybe a few options, order, volume, and frequency?
Great.
What should we be doing? How often should we be doing it? And, for instance, should I do wall sits to failure, then push-ups to failure? Given that this is a local process, I'm guessing that if I do push-ups to failure, I'm not going to increase the number of capillaries in my legs very much.
Correct. So you nailed it. Exercise choice is high precision here. So pick the muscle group and the exact sequencing and movement pattern you want. High precision. This is the thing. If you want to get better at a plank, hold a plank. If you want to do more push-ups, do more push-ups. You can do some other stuff that's complementary, but really this is a high precision game. Do the exact same thing for exercise choice. Very simple there.
Okay, in terms of exercise order, I suppose this dovetails with volume.
Yeah.
Can I combine training, let's say wall sits for my quads and nearby muscle groups, and then do push-ups to failure, and then also do some sort of pulling exercise to failure?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, pick the exercises you want, the movement patterns you want to do, and do them. The order almost doesn't matter with the one caveat. With larger muscle groups, particularly, again, multiple leg activities, that will induce a small amount of systemic fatigue. And so if you, I guess, theoretically wanted to maximize your push-up number and you did a whole bunch of, say, split squats, and you just did those and you did lunges for a mile or something like that, you might actually slightly compromise, you might not, but you might slightly compromise your ability to do as many pull-ups in a row or hold a bent over row or something like that. So if you really cared about that level, then you maybe want to do the thing that's most important first. In general, my recommendation, though, is to do the bigger muscle group first.
How many sets and how often should one perform training for muscular endurance, and when?
Now, the lovely part here is we've moved down the spectrum past hypertrophy. You don't need a lot of load here. In fact, the load only needs to be at or slightly above what you want to move. So if you want to get better at moving 50% of your 1 rep max, you don't really need to train much more than 50, maybe 55 or 60% of your 1 rep max. Because if you go higher than that, the repetition count's going to fall. And you're no longer going to be training muscular endurance. So you just need to stay right around that number that you want to work on. So again, if the target is doing more pull-ups, and assuming that you have the strength to do it, and you check that box, you simply need to practice the repetition range that you want to be in. That's all it takes. You can repeat that a number of times, but because, remember, the volume is fairly low, the load is very, very low, you can actually repeat these quite frequently. So you won't get extremely sore from muscular endurance relative to traditional hypertrophy training because the load is very, very light. So you can do these more frequently if you would like.
More frequently, such as?
You could do it 3 or 4 times a week, easy, if you would like. You don't necessarily need to. 3 days a week per muscle group is probably fine here. If you wanted to do more sets on a given day and do less days, that would be fine. So if you wanted to do 2 days a week and you say wanted to do, let's say you could do 25 push-ups and the goal is to get to 30 push-ups, just as an example. You might say, okay, I'm going to do sets of 17 and I'm going to do 3 sets of that. I'm going to do that 3 days a week. That's going to build up quite a bit. Or you could say, look, I'm going to do a set basically to failure. I'm going to recover and do 1 or 2 sets at, say, 80%. And I'll do that twice a week. That's going to push the pace pretty well. You're going to have a lot of gains from that.
And again, this is not about hypertrophy. This is about muscular endurance.
Correct.
So I do want to emphasize, and again, please correct me if I'm talking out of line here. I do want to emphasize that because we mentioned pull-ups. If you can't get 25 pull-ups, then and you're doing 10, you're training for hypertrophy. You're not training for muscular endurance per se.
Remember, there's a big crossover here. So anytime we're talking past like 15 reps, we're technically in hypertrophy and muscular endurance.
Got it.
So here's the common mistake. I don't want to get bulky. So I'm going to go lighter and do more reps.
And then people grow.
And then you landed still right in the middle of hypertrophy range.
Right.
So like for people who are like, oh my gosh, like every time I lift weights, I blow up, I go lighter, I do more reps, and you're still right in the hypertrophy zone.
They'd actually be much better off training very, very heavy in the 1 to 3 rep range.
Bingo.
They'd get really strong and they wouldn't grow much.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So tell me if this is a reasonable protocol for what I'm going to call the typical person. In my mind, the typical person is somebody who hopefully is doing resistance training, hitting that 10 sets per muscle group per week minimum.
Yep.
To maintain or build strength and hypertrophy, but is also doing some long duration training that we'll talk about in a little bit. Maybe throwing in a high intensity workout here or there, some sprints, maybe some plyometrics, some skill-based training. You're doing a bunch of different things to be what I would call all-around fit.
Yeah.
They're not training for any specific event or trying to maximize any one of the 9 adaptations to the exclusion of the others. Could that person decide, okay, after they do their longer run, they're going to do max time, a plank to max duration. They're going to do a wall sit to max duration, and they're going to do push-ups to max duration. And then also do that same workout before they do their high-intensity interval training some other point during the week. And then maybe even do it again on their so-called rest day. Just a real quick 5 minutes. And in doing so, build more capillaries into the relevant muscle groups and build their muscular endurance.
Yep.
Without eating into their overall recovery too much.
Too much, yeah. So again, the nice part about this is they don't hammer you too much. You're not going to get tremendously sore if you keep the load light. The only switch I would make there is I would probably do them after your interval rather than before, so you can make sure you keep quality there and you're not compromised by a local muscular endurance when you're actually trying to get a more systemic fatigue with something like a higher intensity interval training. So that would work fantastic. The only other variable we haven't hit on here is progression. And this is very simple. Try to add a rep or 2 per week. That's really all you have to go after. So if you're up to 22 this week, try to hit 23 next week.
Or for wall sits and planks, that would mean add time.
Time. Yep.
Right.
And if you run into a wall there, just like the same concepts we talked about with strength or hypertrophy, back it down to more like in the 80 or 85% range and accumulate a lot more practice. That's going to help a lot with capitalization as well as acid buffering. So you're going to continue to give yourself signals for upregulation of the processes needed for that. And it's not always pushing you to the end failure, just like we don't want to always go to failure with strength. We don't want to always go to failure with high intensity intervals either. Same thing would be happening here.
What about anaerobic capacity? How should people train